I am recording this from the edge of something I do not have words for yet. Behind me is the crack in the rock I squeezed through 40 minutes ago. In front of me is everything. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what I found. What matters is what is down here. I'm going to start from the beginning, because if something happens to me, if this recorder is ever found without me attached to it, I need whoever is listening to understand exactly how I got here. And I need them to understand that I did not come alone. I was the only one who made it. Part 1. The Expedition. My team and I have been tracking anomalous cave systems for 3 years. I say anomalous because that is the clinical word for it. The honest word is wrong. These caves felt wrong, not dangerous wrong. Most dangerous caves feel dangerous in ways you can identify. Bad air, unstable rock, flood risk, things you can measure. These were wrong in ways you couldn't measure, in ways that didn't show up on any instrument we carried. We had documented 11 of them across 4 continents. Each one shared the same characteristics: unusually symmetrical entrances, rock formations that predated the surrounding geology by millions of years, and an atmosphere inside. Not chemically, the air was fine, but an atmosphere in the other sense. A feeling, the kind of feeling that makes experienced cavers stop walking without knowing why. We called them the threshold caves, privately, among ourselves, never in any published work. The cave I'm describing now, the one I'm currently inside, was the 12th. We found it 6 weeks ago, in a mountain range I'm not going to name. Not because I don't want to be found, but because I don't want anyone else coming here unprepared. What this place does to people, I'll get to that. There were 7 of us on the team. Myself, lead explorer and documentarian, 15 years of professional caving across 40 countries. Marcus, my second in command, former military, the kind of man who laughed at things that frightened everyone else, the kind of man you want next to you when everything goes wrong. Dr. Yemi, our geologist, the most scientifically rigorous person I have ever met. She didn't believe in anything she couldn't measure. Rin, our medic and biologist, quiet, observant. She noticed things the rest of us walked past. Tobias and Serge, equipment specialists. They'd been on 4 expeditions with me before this one. Reliable in a way that is genuinely rare in this field. Oh, and Flynn, our youngest, 26 years old, his first major expedition. He had more raw talent than any of us, and an enthusiasm that the rest of us had lost somewhere along the way. I think about Flynn a lot since coming down here. 7 people went into that cave. 1 is speaking to you now. Part 2, the first camp, hours 0 to 2. We entered at 0600, early morning. The light was flat and gray, the kind that sits on mountain rock like fog. The entrance was exactly as we had documented during our survey, roughly 2 meters wide, almost perfectly arched. Too perfect. Dr. Yemi had noted during the survey that the symmetry was statistically improbable for a natural formation. She had 17 theories. She never got to test any of them. The first 2 hours were unremarkable in almost every way. The cave descended at a moderate gradient. Our lights were strong. The air was clean. The rock was stable. Tobias and Serge were efficient as always, laying line, marking the route, keeping communication equipment active. Marcus was cracking jokes. Flynn was practically buzzing with excitement, running his hands along the cave walls like he was reading them. It was Rin who first noticed the crystals. About 40 minutes in, partially embedded in the left wall of the passage, a cluster of mineral formations unlike anything any of us had seen. They were deep violet, almost ultraviolet, and they caught torchlight in a way that felt less like reflection and more like absorption. Like the crystals were taking the light in and holding on to it. Dr. Yemi was on them immediately. She chipped a small sample. ran her initial tests, looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. "I don't know what this is," she said. In 15 years of working with Dr. Yemi, I had never heard her say those words. We documented the crystals and kept moving. We reached our first camp at the 2-hour mark, a wider section of the passage we'd identified during the survey. We ate, checked equipment. Everyone was in good spirits. That was the last time all 7 of us were in good spirits simultaneously. Part 3. The second descent. Hours 2-4. The cave changed after the first camp. It's difficult to describe precisely how. The dimensions were similar. The rock type was consistent, but something about the quality of the space was different. The way sound moved felt wrong. Our voices seemed to arrive at our own ears a fraction of a second too late, as though the cave was processing what we said before returning it to us. The crystals became more frequent. Entire sections of wall now glittered with them, and they had begun to exhibit something none of us could explain. A faint luminescence that had nothing to do with our torches. Switch off the lights, and the walls glowed, dimly, just enough to see your own hand in front of your face. Dr. Yemi stopped speaking at some point during the 3rd hour. Not dramatically, not suddenly. She just gradually went quiet. I assumed she was thinking. She was always thinking. It was Marcus who noticed something was wrong with her. "Yemi," he said, "you all right?" She turned to look at him. "Do you hear that?" she said. None of us heard anything. She insisted there was a sound, low, rhythmic, coming from below us. She said it was getting louder the deeper we went and she couldn't make it stop. We checked her equipment, checked the air quality. Everything was normal. We kept moving. The electrical sensation began around the 4-hour mark. I noticed it first as a tingling in my fingertips, the kind you get from touching a television screen. Then it spread up my arms. Then it was across my whole body, a low persistent hum that sat somewhere between sensation and sound. The hairs on my arms were standing. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing. I looked at Marcus. He was rubbing his hands together. "Static," he said. But there was no source for it. No equipment malfunction, no friction. The electrical charge in the air around us was simply increasing the deeper we went, as though the cave itself was generating it. Serge stopped walking. He was a practical man, not prone to dramatics. When he stopped, everyone stopped. "I need to go back," he said. Just like that, quietly, completely certain. We asked him why. He couldn't explain it. He said something was telling him to go back. Not a feeling, he said. A voice. Something in his head that wasn't his own thoughts was telling him, clearly and repeatedly, to turn around and go back up. We tried to convince him otherwise. He wouldn't move. His eyes had a look in them I'd only ever seen once before, in a man I'd pulled out of a cave collapse in Slovenia. Pure, animal certainty that he was about to die. We couldn't leave him alone. Tobias volunteered to take him back to the surface. They would wait for us there. 5 of us continued down. Part 4. The third descent. Hours 4-6. The cave was alive. I know how that sounds. I know it is not a scientifically defensible statement, but there is no other way to describe what the passage felt like in those hours. The walls pulsed, not visibly, not in a way you could point to, but in a way you felt against your palms when you touched the rock. A slow, deep rhythmic movement, like a heartbeat so large and slow that each beat was separated from the last by a full minute. The sparks started at hour 5, small at first, tiny blue-white discharges jumping between crystal formations, like lightning in miniature. Flynn reached out to touch one, and I grabbed his arm before he could. We watched them in silence for a long moment. They jumped in patterns, not randomly, in patterns. Dr. Yemi, who had been quiet for nearly 2 hours, said something then that I still think about. "It's communicating," she said. None of us responded. I think because none of us wanted to pursue what she meant by that. The headache started at hour 5.5. Not for me, for Marcus, Dr. Yemi, Rin and Flynn, all roughly simultaneously, within about 20 minutes of each other, described differently by each of them, but all centered on the same experience. Not pain exactly, pressure, something pressing inward on their skulls from every direction, and underneath the pressure, sounds, or not sounds, impressions of sounds, things that arrived in the mind without passing through the ears. Marcus described it as someone whispering directly into his brain in a language he didn't speak. Flynn said it was like a frequency, like being too close to a speaker playing a note too low to hear, but too powerful to ignore. Dr. Yemi said nothing. She had stopped talking almost entirely by this point. She walked. She kept pace. But behind her eyes something had changed, and I was starting to get frightened for her. Rin pulled me aside at the hour 6 mark. "We need to talk about turning back," she said quietly. I looked at her. She was our medic. Her assessment carried weight. "The others?" I said. She nodded. "I don't know what's happening to them, but it's getting worse the deeper we go. Whatever this cave is doing, it's doing it to them, not to you. I don't know why." I had noticed that. I had been trying not to notice it, but I had. The static, the pressure, the sounds in the head, none of it was affecting me the way it was affecting the others. I felt the electricity. I felt the goosebumps that hadn't left my arms for 2 hours. But I wasn't hearing voices. I wasn't feeling the pressure, and I didn't know what that meant. We made camp for the second time, ate in near silence. I watched my team. Marcus, who had never been rattled by anything in the years I'd known him, was sitting with his back against the cave wall, eyes closed, jaw tight, pressing his palms against the sides of his head. Dr. Yemi was writing in her notebook. She had been writing continuously for over an hour. I looked over her shoulder at one point. The writing was hers, but the content wasn't. She was transcribing something, copying something down. I asked her what she was writing. She said she was writing what the cave was telling her. I made the decision at that point. I asked Flynn and Rin to take Marcus and Dr. Yemi back to the surface. Get them out. Get them checked. Wait for me. The argument that followed was the longest conversation we had in that cave. Flynn refused to leave. Marcus, despite everything, refused to leave. It took Rin pulling rank as our medic, citing genuine medical concern, to convince them. One by one, I watched them go. Marcus stopped at the edge of my torchlight and turned back to look at me. Just for a moment. Then he was gone. I have not seen any of them since. I am choosing to believe they made it out. I have to believe that. I turned back toward the darkness below me and kept going. Part 5. Alone. Hour 6-7. I am not going to pretend that descending alone into that cave after what I had just watched happen to my team was anything other than one of the most frightening things I have ever done. It was not bravery. I want to be clear about that. It was something closer to compulsion. The cave was pulling me down the same way it had been pushing the others back up. Whatever selective process was happening inside that mountain, I was on the side it wanted. The passage narrowed significantly in the 7th hour. What had been a comfortable corridor became a crawl space. Then a crawl space became something I had to squeeze through on my front, pack dragging behind me, torchlight throwing shadows that my imagination populated with things I told myself weren't there. The crystals here were extraordinary, every surface covered. The entire passage glowed violet-white, pulsing slowly, and the sparks were constant now, not jumping between formations but flowing, like current through wire, running in visible streams along the walls and ceiling and floor. The air was warm, far warmer than it should have been this deep, and the smell, I had noticed it for hours, but down here it was undeniable. Organic, alive, like the smell of a forest after rain, but older, something underneath the familiarity that was entirely alien. My entire body was electric, every hair standing, every nerve ending firing, not painfully, but insistently, like being touched by something that wasn't there, like the cave was reading me the same way I was reading it. I had goosebumps so constant they had ceased to feel like a reaction and had become simply a state of being. And underneath all of it, a sound, low, rhythmic, the sound Dr. Yemi had been hearing for hours. I could hear it now, not in my head, in the rock, transmitted through the stone into my palms and knees as I crawled. A pulse, slow and vast and utterly incomprehensible.
I told myself it was geological, tectonic movement, water flow deep beneath the rock. I didn't believe myself. The passage, no widening of the space, no change in air movement, just the crawl space. And then suddenly, it wasn't a crawl space anymore. I stood up. The chamber was roughly the size of a large cathedral. The ceiling arched 30, maybe 40 meters above my head, and every single surface of every wall from floor to ceiling was covered. I stood in the entrance for a long time before I moved. The script was precise, dense, line after line after line of markings so consistent and deliberate that there was no conceivable interpretation other than language. Not cave paintings, not symbolic imagery. Language, a written language, covering the entirety of a chamber so large that the far wall disappeared into darkness beyond my torchlight. I walked to the nearest section and held my light close. The markings were carved into the rock, but the edges were not rough. They were smooth, almost polished, as if something had moved through the stone the way water moves through sand. Not chiseled, dissolved. The rock around each mark was unbroken, as if the script had simply appeared inside it. Some sections were clearly different from others. Older, the markings shallower, more worn, and newer sections where the script was so sharp and clean it might have been made yesterday. More than one hand, more than one time. I photographed everything. It took over an hour. My hands were shaking, not from cold. I didn't notice my hands were shaking until I reviewed the footage later and saw the images blurring. In one section, near the base of the far wall, the markings changed, became more pictorial. And what the images depicted, pause, 5 seconds. I'm not going to describe what I saw in those images yet. Not in this entry. I need more time to process what they mean. What I will say is that someone, something, had been here long before me, had stood in this chamber, had looked at what I am about to look at, and had felt compelled to warn whoever came next, headed with something that produces light. Pale, blue-white, constant, like a sky that cannot decide whether it is dawn or dusk, and has settled permanently somewhere between. There are mountains in the distance, real mountains, a range of them, running along what I think is the edge of this space, though the scale is so vast I cannot be certain. There are rivers. I can see the light catching on water far below. And there is movement. In the forest. On the open ground beyond the forest. Movement on a scale that I cannot account for with any living thing I have ever seen on the surface. Large movement. I need to find a way down. I don't know how long I have been down here. My watch stopped working somewhere around hour 5 of the descent. I noticed it only when I checked it, and found it had frozen at 11:47. My backup watch stopped at the same time. My phone is dead. I have food for 3 weeks if I'm careful. Water I will need to source below. I have my climbing gear, my ropes, my full survival pack. I have this recorder, and I have the absolute, unshakable certainty. I cannot explain where it comes from. It may be the cave. It may simply be what happens to a person when they see something like this. The certainty that I was supposed to find this place. That whatever selected me over my crew, whatever let me through when it turned the others back, it had a reason. This is entry 001. I will record entry 002 when I reach the bottom. If I reach the bottom. The Hollow Earth Explorer logs continue in entry 002. If you're still awake, the descent is over. What comes next is something else entirely. This is Primal Dread. Sleep well.